And so one of the biggest culprits of where time goes when it comes to running a video business is in editing. It's the thing that you can do anywhere in the world. The problem is it's a thing you can do anywhere in the world, which means it follows you everywhere. Now, if you were supposed to be like unplugging for the weekend and spending quality time with your wife and kids, or your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, how are you going to be able to do that if you're the only one editing, but the project is still due? What's up, guys? Welcome back to episode number 2 of the Wealthy Creative Show. Today, we are talking about editing and the delegation of the editing.
And buying back your time.
So first things first, if you guys have not, this is your first episode you've watched of the Wealthy Creative Show, highly recommend you go check out episode 1 because we build the foundation of, and that's really what's probably going to be titled is like the foundation of what it means to build wealth and why it's okay to build wealth, right? So if we're going to build wealth and live an abundant life, part of being wealthy is having time freedom, right? And if you are slaved, chained to an editing desk for the rest of your life, that's not a very, I would not consider someone who they're bound by how much editing they have to do. I would not consider that a wealthy person personally, because they don't have the resource of time. If they are, now here's a, on the reverse side, if you love editing and that's something that you're just like, dude, I'm an editor. I run a post house and I'm the best editor. I love editing. There's lots of ways to make money. You don't have to delegate or outsource your editing. But by and large, what I've seen from various creatives that I've coached and then in my own business is I've noticed that editing can be a huge bottleneck on time.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you were trying to scale up a business past the 6-figure mark, one of the hardest things to get past is you have to realize that you can't do it alone. And it's going to take a team for you to get to multiple 6 figures. Yeah. And now that team could be contractors, they could be W-2 staff, but regardless, editing is the number one thing you can do to buy back your time because it takes 3 times longer minimum to edit than it does to shoot. So meaning if you spend 8 hours filming, you get 8 hours of raw content. It will take you at least 24 hours, 8 times 3, times 24 hours to actually get the thing edited. And now that's not, the screen just went to blue. I don't know what just happened.
That's the mountain in the background.
No, it went to ask more from your TV. Alexa, stop. Not now. Bro, what's that? Hold on. Don't move. I'll get, remind me where I was though.
Well, one of the things we're trying to do right now is to try and build out the set for the podcast. And we have this very awesome TV that we were playing this in here? Mountains in the background.
We were trying to give you guys some mountain views behind AJ, just in case you didn't want to look at AJ.
You heard an eagle in the back.
Yeah.
But you were talking about, but you were talking about buying back your time and how editing takes 3 times longer than shooting does, and it's a lot to do, especially if you're by yourself and you're just starting your business, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to grow it.
And in different phases of life, right? So like when you're in the very beginning, like when I was in the very beginning, started Grindstone, I did everything. So I did the selling, the marketing, the shooting, the editing, the fulfillment, the bringing donuts to set to make our clients happy, and like all the little things, right? I did everything. And like, that's amazing. Nothing wrong with that. You can get a really, really build a really good life for yourself doing that. But if you want to build wealth, you need to operate first and foremost. If you're going to build wealth, you have to have a surplus, which means excess money above and beyond to cover your basic needs, right? So if you're going to do that, there's a couple of different steps to like getting there. One, you have to increase your ability to produce income because I think it's actually impossible to be wealthy without an income, right? Without some sort of an income that is high. Yeah. And so there's first and foremost, the way to do that is to get skills, right? So shooting, editing, creative consulting, social media management, social media strategy, all of these are different ways that you can provide value to people. And then with that, what do you do after that though? You provide value to them, and then it's you working as the individual in the business. So you're spending all of your time as the entrepreneur, as the CEO, working in the business.
You wear all the hats.
You wear all the hats. You're working in the business. Okay. So if you're ever going to build a business that works while you sleep and something that doesn't rely solely on you, the individual, to make income, that means you have to spend time working on the business, right? Which is to say all of the things around building the business from a system standpoint, marketing, sales, all things that add to the growth of the business on the outside, not just spending all of your time editing. Right.
Well, just to add to that also plays into what we talked about earlier about faith, family, and finances, right? Like you can't be wealthy because like we talked about in the last episode, which you guys should go back and watch. Being wealthy isn't making a ton of money and, having no time to, give to people on different occasions to be able to provide for your family and build the life for your children. And so this is just one small step that Landon's getting into about how you can get to that point.
Right.
So.
And you don't just need when you're, and again, tying this back to a biblical foundation, into a foundation of leaving a great inheritance for your children's children, which is Proverbs 13:22, if I remember correctly. If you're going to do that, part of leaving an inheritance to your children's children is actually being with them, right? Giving them your time so that you can help them steward the resources well that you would give them in the future. So it's not enough to get rich and pass it all down and forsake spending time with your family. And so one of the biggest culprits of like where time goes when it comes to running a video business is in editing. It's the thing that you can do anywhere in the world. The problem is it's a thing you can do anywhere in the world, which means it follows you everywhere. So when you're on vacation with your wife and there's an edit due, unfortunately or fortunately, you can do that edit there, right? And that's great if you have the boundaries around it to where you're not like, oh man, I gotta get this edit done. Thank God I've got my laptop, right? Now, if you were supposed to be like unplugging for the weekend and spending quality time with your wife and kids, or your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, like how are you going to be able to do that if you're the only one editing, but the project is still due? That's the thing. So first and foremost, understanding what does it mean to be a wealthy creative? A wealthy creative is somebody who has time freedom to be able to give to the causes that they want to give to. So that means to spend time with whoever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want. It means you have options. That's really what it means to be wealthy. And so if you're going to have options, that means that you would have the time to spend doing different things, and you can't spend time if you literally don't have time because you're always editing. So now that we have a foundation and understanding of why we need to buy back our time, which, by the way, shameless plug, great book, the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. If you're creative and you're looking to buy back more of your time and spend it with the people you love, you need to read that book. It's so good. Like every single creative I've recommended it to and bought it for a few of my clients, they have told me like this book changed the way I operate my entire life. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about buying back your time so that you can spend it on growing the business. You can spend it with the people that you love. And you can spend it on things that generate more income for the business to then build wealth, right? So let's like break down a normal day. So if you go shoot for like an 8-hour day, you're probably going to capture roughly 5 to 6 hours worth of footage. And then you have your 5 to 6 hours worth of footage. We already talked about like there's a minimum 3x multiplier on raw footage to number of hours editing. That's a bare minimum with no rotoscoping, no animation, no lower third, like all of that stuff takes a lot of time. And for the people on here that have hotkeyed their way to editing faster, I'm just going to tell you right now, even if you're the fastest editor on the planet, you still have to watch the footage. So this isn't about just getting faster. At a certain point, you will reach your capacity. If you're not there yet, congratulations, you're on your way. So let's say that you have, 5 hours worth of raw content. You minimum are going to have to edit for 15 hours. So what most people would do is they would say, okay, cool. I'm the entrepreneur in the business, and this is what I did in the beginning. I'm going to take all of this on. And what changed in my life, though, of where I really started to grow the business is when we hired Jacob, our good friend Jacob Schlick. Shout out Saturn's Lens. So I hope he watches this. Plug. So because he's an entrepreneur as well that used to work at Grindstone, is one of our first team members. So when I hired Jacob, that was a pivotal moment in my life because I was able to, with trust, be able to go shoot something, pass it to him as an editor, and then either keep shooting the next day or go sell the next day.
Yeah.
So I was buying back my time by hiring him. And by the way, creating an income for him and his future family, which is dope, right? He worked with, I think, for almost 3 years.
Yeah, he was
right?
there for a while.
3 years at Grindstone. So like, God bless him. Like he's been such a blessing to us from the very beginning of the business. And so like Jacob, when we hired Jacob, that changed the way the whole business ran immediately, because I made a decision. I was like, you know what? Enough's enough. Like, I'm done editing at least the first rounds. Like I said, like, even if I have to come back and put in my 2 cents on your final edit, Jacob, like I want you to handle the first 90%. And so what we're going to talk about today is actually a system that you guys can use to effectively delegate editing without the fear of, oh, what if my quality drops? Or what if the client notices that my edit's different than last time, or something along those lines? We did this at Grindstone. We scaled up to, I believe, 6 in-house full-time editors and then 3 remote. So like 9. I think it was like 6 or 9 editors at one time. We had people coming in and out, and we had contractors. We also had full-time staff, but like at any given time, we had a lot of people who were editing a lot of stuff. And so if you're going to keep your quality, which is what was a foundational tenet of Grindstone, is making sure that like we had really, really good quality and we kept our integrity. Standards have to be upheld, which means that like if I carry the standard or Jenna carries the standard, we had to make sure that that standard was kept all the way through. So this is a big deal to us as we were, we were layering up, and we had a lot of people on staff. So this is the exact system that we used to maintain quality while increasing scale. And it's called the bell curve editing system. And here's how it works. The first 10%, and I want you guys, if you could quickly Google, and like you should just show this on the screen, show a bell curve, right? Boom.
Right there.
Yeah, and then like it pops up in your hands. So yeah, poof. So you've got the bell curve editing system, right? So you've got the initial 10%. And the initial 10% is where you're basically going to set the strategy for the edit. So meaning you're gonna like determine what does a deliverable actually have to look like with the raw assets that we have. First and foremost, I think is the question: do we have all the assets we need?
Yeah.
Do we actually need to go get more footage? We need more B-roll. Do we need more A-roll? Whatever. So first and foremost, like getting all of those things layered out. Do we have all the assets we need? Do we have the music picked out? Because the music, as everyone complains online, does affect the edit. You don't want to be changing. And like, I would complain too. It's just funny to hear people because it's like a big thing in the editing world. Like, love the edit. Can you just change the music?
It's like fire.
Yeah, there's a whole meme culture around it. And so we want to make sure that all the assets are there. We have all the music picked out. We have clarity on their brand standard guidelines. So like their logos, their fonts, all that stuff. We don't want to be changing that later, right? And so much of that, when people get revisions back from clients, is because they didn't do things and ask the right questions the first time.
They didn't set the good foundation for basically the rest of the entire process.
Right. Whether they themselves as the entrepreneur or the CEO edit it, or the team member.
Yeah.
They didn't get the right assets. So making sure you have everything, and then like you have a clear direction for like where the storyline is supposed to go. So like if it's a brand story video or a testimonial, are we editing this like it's a testimonial, or are we editing this like it's a hype promo for like a shoe company?
Yeah.
Like it's important to know the difference of what we're doing. So what are we editing? And then look and feel. So do we have any other pieces of content we can reference to of like the look and feel and the vibe we're going for? That will inform a lot of our decisions. So once you've got all those things, that's kind of the first 10%, I would say. Right. And when you think about a bell curve, the left 1/3 is going to be, or it's more than, or less than 1/3, but you get the idea. The left phase 1 is really logistics. Okay.
And whose responsibility is that?
That is a responsibility. This is a great question. That is a responsibility of the owner. And so like if you're in an agency, that would be the responsibility of the creative director who was leading the shoot that day. If you are the CEO, or excuse me, if you're like the entrepreneur that's running the company, and you're like a one-man company and you're delegating to a contracted editor, that is your responsibility as the owner, as the CEO of the company. Your job is to set the standard of excellence and make sure that your people have everything they need to win, because that's like one of the biggest things in leadership. Make sure that your people have the right raw materials to win. So, and that raw material could be the assets. It also could be direction, because if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. So your job is to make the map for them. So that's the first 10%, make the map really, really write out all the logistics. Okay. Then you get into phase 2, and that's the fat part of a bell curve where you have literally all of the boring work being done. And I say boring, but I was thinking about this actually on the treadmill the other day. When I say something is boring, there's people that literally like, prime example. If you think accounting is boring, there is accountants that literally like their whole life is being a CPA.
Yeah.
So just because you think it's boring doesn't mean everybody thinks it's boring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I always used to call it like also, so you call it the boring work. Sometimes I call it like the grunt work, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
grunt work.
It's the stuff that, I mean, you have to, it
has to be done.
consumes so much of your time because it's the creation, it's the production.
It's the actual like blocking and tackling that AI is drastically like starting to reduce, which I'm sure we'll have tons of episodes on this stuff.
Yeah.
But like before AI though, which is when we started Grindstone, which is over 6 years ago now, when we were building up, like we didn't have that. So the middle 80%, which most people, there's not enough AI tech that could do this effectively, right? With the creative process. So now you have like the middle 80%. So it's 10, 80, 10 if we're like mapping this out. And what we're doing here is we're using the 80-20 rule because the first 10% and the last 10% are actually the most important.
Yeah.
Right? The 20% on either end, that's what gives you the 80% of results. So it's kind of like a double entendre with like the Pareto principle of 80-20 rule, but it's also a bell curve showing you like, this is the bulk of the work.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fat part of the bell curve is where you're going to delegate the work to an editor, whether it be an internal W-2 staff member or a contractor. So you delegate that work to them, and then you monitor their progress and set milestones. This is the part where people get so upset. They will outsource to like an editor on Fiverr, and they'll be like, yeah, they sucked. It's like, cool. Let me ask the question. What resources did you give them? What expectations did you give them on communication? When did you tell them the milestones were? Did they know to check in with you once they cut through all the B-roll? Did they know to check in with you once they had the initial story arc drafted?
Yeah.
No, probably not. So that's a big piece of it, is making sure that we've got great communications on milestones, expectation, communication, and we have an overall process in place to like look and see how the edit's going. So it's really simple, guys. You just have them get on Zoom with you, share their editing screen, like share screen, and say, hey, walk me through your timeline so far. That's simple, right? And so if you set milestones for that and they know exactly what they need to do in the exact time frame that it needs to be done, how can they fail, right?
Yeah.
You want to put them in a position. And by the way, the only way that they could fail in that perspective is if they don't do the work, right? Or they're just like willingly insubordinate, which in that case, like that's another conversation. They either need to be put on a performance improvement plan or fired.
Yeah.
Or if they're a contractor, just not work with them again.
Yeah. 100%.
So many people get upset at the contractor when it's so much more like their fault. It's their responsibility. So that's the 80%. Do you feel like we covered that? Do you have questions or like things that you think could prompt the audience that would help them?
I mean, there's so many things in that 80% that like we could cover, but I mean,
we should cover the actual like tactics of what's being done. That would be smart.
Oh yeah,
we did
absolutely.
like pre-pro or like kind of like pre-pro alignment and now in logistics. Now we need to cover like what. So like you were in the edit you were in the wedding world.
Yeah.
So when you delegate the 80%, which is the middle section, what exactly were you delegating out to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to hit on if I wanted to hit on a couple points that you mentioned earlier, something that you said was like, if they aren't like meeting up to the expectations that you've set, then they're either they either one need to be put on a performance plan, or two, they need to be fired. And that's exactly what my experience was the first time, because what I learned was that I was not setting the foundation as well as I could have been setting it, which obviously is a lesson, because you need to send them the assets. And what I actually ended up doing was creating training videos, which was something that I had never done before. So like actually taking the time to film myself in a high quality production that was easy to consume, so that way the editor could be like, oh, that's what you mean. Because sometimes people are visual learners. Sometimes they're audible learners.
All editors are visual learners. Fun fact, guys. Learners. If you meet an editor who is a written learner or there's experiential as well. But if you meet an editor who's a written learner more than a experiential or a kinesthetic or visual learner, let me know. But put it in the comments, because we want to meet you. Because you're a rare creature.
You are an anomaly. That is for
anomaly.
Sure. Absolute unicorn.
Yeah.
But then with the 80%, what I love as far as the process that we have dialed in now, it's amazing because I can trust my editor to basically take on everything from lining up the speeches and lining up the ceremony audio, making sure it's all nice and clean and crispy, to cutting through the B-roll, to, you know, fading in and out the music, to color grading. So for me, and we can get into like the final 10%, which Landon will hit on, but for me, then basically like that's really all I have to worry about.
So right? this is a really hot topic on the middle 80% because you've gotten there have been people who have thrown some shade.
Yeah,
right?
They are not the biggest fans of the way I operate.
So, but I want to let's focus on why here.
Yeah.
So in the world of the video business, you have artists, you have entrepreneurs. Alex Ramosi does an amazing job of actually like documenting this. Yeah. And he talks about how like it's like a spectrum and you have artists on the left side, entrepreneur on the right.
Yeah.
And so some folks that are really like hardcore artisans, they're on the far left side of being like towards the art of the craft. And God bless those people. Nothing against them. If you're one of those people, that's awesome.
Yeah.
The only downside of that is just like the scalability aspect.
Absolutely.
And like those people wouldn't argue with the fact that what they're doing is not scalable. That's not really what's in question. It's more so like, what do you want? Yeah. If you want the life, like we just got done watching the guy, we were watching that dude that makes chocolate cars on Instagram like all the chocolate sculptures. That'd be like good B-roll input. So that guy, right?
Yeah.
He isn't Ferrero Rocher where he's producing hundreds of millions of chocolates every day in a factory, yet homeboy has a show on Netflix and gets paid millions, I'm sure, per year to make chocolate figurines and chocolate like structures.
Yeah, 100%.
He is hardcore artisan and makes more money than most chocolate companies. Or not most chocolate companies, but except for like the big ones.
Yeah.
All the mom and pop chocolate companies, he's destroying them because he's the best in the world at what he does.
He probably has more take home, honestly.
Way more. Yeah. Way more, right? So there's that guy, right?
Yeah.
Artisan. Yes. And then you have like, the other side, chocolate side, you have Ferrero Rocher, which is like one of the largest chocolate companies in the world. Fun fact, Grindstone was blessed to be able to work with them directly and Hershey's chocolate. We got to work with all these huge candy brands for a project that we did in Chicago. And so we learned a lot about that space. But my whole point with that is like, the Ferrero people are more like quality and quantity. So like they're towards the entrepreneur, maybe more the entrepreneur side. And then like you have this individual artisan who's also making bank, like millions of dollars. So it's not that there's a right or a wrong way to do it. So if you're an editor who loves editing and you don't want to give it up, like don't take that as an offense from us. That's not what we're trying to get at. All we're simply addressing is the scalability of what you're doing. So back to you. There is there's been a few people that had made comments about the fact that you were utilizing your editing team to like get the middle 80% done. But what they don't actually understand is that there's the pre-planning and then there's the end where you're actually putting the final touches on it.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the misconception is that you're just throwing darts in the darkness and then you're just kind of like hoping.
I hope the client likes that and not like caring at all.
Yeah, no, but it's very much just like the way we're talking about it. It's still a very structured process on how we do it. Just like I'm sure most artists approach, creating chocolates like statues. Like they have a start, like they want to build a great foundation. They work their way up and they've been doing it. Yeah. They have a very specific way on how they approach it, right? We have a very specific way on how we approach video editing. It's just different than somebody who does it just by themselves, right? So we just do it different.
But the whole point of what you're getting at is like the end caps of the 10% in the editing bell curve. So you have the initial 10% logistics, then you have in the middle the big fat part, you have monitor progress, and then the end you have review, revise, and deliver. And so what most people do when they get burned with using other editors is they either skip the beginning or they skip the end is really what happens, because they'll skip the pre-planning part and say, hey, good luck. And they end up fixing everything in the back 10%, right? And then you have folks who don't review, revise, and deliver, but they just do the pre-planning and then have the editor do the 80% and hope for the best, which is like both ways are terrible. Don't do that. So it's a complete system. And like, by the way, this was born out of necessity because we had a desire to keep the quality, but we also had a desire to scale. And that's what great businesses do. Like a prime example of this, like in the business world, would be with McDonald's. Like the brothers who created McDonald's originally, they had an incredible system, right? But then Ray Kroc came along and he said, like, we're going to take this system and we're going to scale it to the moon. And he did that. And so while these guys, the brothers that were the original, like the McDonald's crew that like built the first McDonald's and like that was their business, they were great artisans of making that like beautiful thing. But what Ray Kroc's genius was on the hardcore entrepreneur side, right? All the way to the entrepreneur side. What his genius was is scaling things and systemizing things and then growing it.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have people that are the artisan, you'll have people that are the entrepreneur, but there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what life do you want?
And you don't have to be all the way right or all the way left.
You can be right in the middle.
And I would say, like, even for myself, just from my personal experience, I'm in the middle because, like I said, we do the first 10%, our editors take on the bulk of the 80%, and then we do the final 10%, which is the review, revise, and deliver. And I would like to say that, like, we've done a very good job of training our team, which goes back to the first 10% of training our team and setting the expectation of this is what we need included in this video and this is the typical structure of it. Here's 100 examples of everything we've done in the past, like basically before you guys.
Yeah.
And then basically what they do is they get it to that 80% or that 90%, and then we just put on that last little 10% flair that really makes it, you know, us.
And you're cutting down your editing time as an entrepreneur, as the owner of the company, from, let's use the initial equation from like, if it's a minimum of 24 hours, now you're editing it for maybe what, 6? Not
even, maybe. Like, honestly, I mean,
so you've cut down 75% of the editing. 75%. So 75% of the hours that it takes. And here's the really important thing with this too. When you delegate out the really time consuming middle and the editing bell curve, you know what it does? It preserves your sanity and your creative flair. And that's something that no freaking entrepreneur who edits stuff can ever, they can't challenge us on that. Because when you're ripping through 100+ hours of training videos, you can't look me in the eye and tell you that's the most creative thing and you just freaking love doing it because it's so creative. It's not true, right? There's an aspect of it that just like has to get done. Like there's the work that just has to happen. And there's nothing wrong with giving somebody another opportunity or another shot to work with you, work under you while you're pursuing your excellence on the beginning 10% and the end 10%.
Absolutely.
And when it gets really fun, bro, is when you delegate the entire production process. You don't even know that it got sent to the client. And I say that because we have such great systems and people in place that care even more than I do, which I didn't think was possible, but it's true. And that's when it gets really fun. And so we're going to talk about scaling, you know, past that on multiple future episodes, but let's just like review this system one more time so people have it like drilled into their skull.
Let's do it. Okay, so like I said, this is the Cliff Notes version of this. So if you're writing this down, do this for me. Write logistics, underline it. This is the first 10%. Now it's different for any industry that you're in. We're in the wedding industry, so a lot of the stuff that we have to relay on who our editors or relay to our editors is story-based. We have to make sure that they really understand how to align, you know, the speeches and the ceremony, and then especially in those aspects, what's important, right? So whatever that is for you in whatever industry you're in, I'm getting so passionate, I'm hitting the mic. Whatever industry you're in, that's what's going to be, that's what's going to fall under that 10%. So if that's vision, if you need to create training for them, if there's specific sound effects, music, having good music selections.
Your standards on the depth of sound even. Because like there's some editors, they're going to go with their current level of training and they're going to execute with their current level of training. So you're either going to, and most people, it's always less than, right? It's always like less work maybe than you would want. So if you have a standard that like every single camera slide and I'm over exaggerating, but every single like fast camera movement should have a whoosh sound effect. Well, then like you need to communicate that because you're going to be super disappointed when you get into their milestones in the 80%.
Totally. Absolutely. So that's everything that's like in that first 10%, but the 80% is where you really get to be hands off. And this is one of the most important parts. So, right. Super cool. the middle, the 80% of the bell curve is going to be the bulk of what your editor is going to take on. So that's going to be monitoring progress and checking in on milestones.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, you got it.
Awesome. And so, I mean, your editor is basically taking everything that you gave them. They're taking the foundation that you built for them and they're executing on that, right? And so you can set your milestones for when you want to check in with them. You can set your milestones for updates on what they need to be giving you as you guys are going throughout the timeline of trying to deliver this video on. But that's the bulk of the 80%, and whatever that looks like for your industry, that's going to be unique for everyone.
And like, again, so we can hit this tactically,
Yes.
that's cutting up the A-roll, cutting up the B-roll. So like, I'm obviously preaching to the choir here. You guys probably don't need to hear this, but like, prime example. So when we were at Grindstone, we told people like, go find the gold. So like all the clips in Premiere would start off in blue and they would isolate them out and they would say like, they would take the beginning of a B-roll, B-roll clip and then like the end of a B-roll clip.
Yeah.
And so the caps are usually not as good, right? Or there'll be certain aspects of it consistently with that shooter that are like not as good. Yeah. So then you would clip all that crap out so that when you're ready to actually go edit, either you're the person that's doing the 80% or you're the CEO that's finalizing, then you're working with the gold, not the blue.
Yeah.
And that's why I said like, go find the gold.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So their job is to like isolate the blue, find the gold, and then ultimately like start beginning to craft the initial story arc, even if you're wrong. Like even if they suck at it, have them take one shot so that they can get better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's a good learning lesson too for them, right?
Dude, how are they going to learn if they can't do it? And so like, if you really want to like train them to take on the entire edit, which is the dream, right? Like AJ, I don't need to like give AJ feedback on like a story arc. Like he just knows.
Yeah.
Same thing with a podcast. Podcast a little easier because it's pretty cut and dry.
It's pretty linear.
It's pretty linear, but like but even like something that's not linear, story based, I don't have to like guess because you got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's not like on point, like, if there's a moment where it's not exactly like what your vision was, you communicate that. Bingo. And then we just build off of there and we do it better the next time.
Exactly.
Right. And so that brings us after that 80% to our final 10%, which is review, revise, and deliver. Right. And so in that section, that's where we really make it unique, and we make it unique to you. Right. And if you want to expand on that a little bit more, you can.
For sure. So review, revise, and deliver is super critical because that's what like, if you're, again, I'm just imagining a one person, starting up video agency, you're making like 5-10K a month and like, you're still kind of doing everything. Right. And you want to go to a higher level. When you're doing everything yourself, one of the biggest ways you'll be able to do that is obviously delegating editing. And so, but you don't want to delegate editing at the cost of losing quality. You don't want to sacrifice quality just so you can scale because companies do it all the time and it's not good. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we have systems in place to keep quality high. And so what we do, we review what they give us. So if they get us to the 80%, which is on a bell curve to 100%, that would be like 90% complete, right? They get us there. Now we have a decision to make. We either say, holy cow, AJ crushed that edit, checks all my boxes, let's send it to the client. That's the dream, right?
That's the dream.
That's the dream. And so at the beginning though, when you're working with an editor you don't know, or even working with an editor that you're trying to improve their quality, it's not going to be like that. So you have to like not only review it for your sake of sanity so you don't send something bad to the client, but number two, revise. And here's the key, dude. When we made revisions at Grindstone, what did we do? We came behind you guys, sat behind you in a desk chair, and like as you were editing, be like, I would change this, this, and this. And I edited over your shoulder for the first couple of videos so that one, you weren't taking the edits personally when you saw it on like an email of like, oh my gosh, you suck, right? It wasn't like that. You were like, hey, this is what I would have done differently. This is my standard. This is how I want it. And you were like, cool, thanks for being a clear communicator. This is amazing. Like I know exactly. And so we would always edit in time code. So like, and like when someone would resubmit an edit sheet or something, it would always be like, okay, cool. Well, what time code is that at? But that never was a problem when you actually were listing time code and say, so example would be like, the lower third is too early, move the lower third from 0:32 to 0:34. Really simple, clear as kind. And so if you can be really clear, that's helpful. And when you're training them though, really get them to either edit with them on Zoom if they're a remote editor, but literally have them watch you fix what they did and be like, this is what I would have done differently. Because ultimately, like people don't want to edit something and then not make you happy in the process if they're an editor. They want to make sure everybody's happy. Right? So the way that you can do that sooner is by educating them as you edit it back, right? So that's like a time consuming process, but it pays dividends
Yeah.
and they'll appreciate the training. So that's after you review it, that's the revision stage, is when you're actually editing it with them.
You could even do like revision and education.
Yeah,
honestly,
exactly.
Like a dash.
Yeah, revision / education. That's a really good point. And then we have deliver. So once it's finally ready, you know, we have it like called the final cut, right? That's what we called it at Grindstone. When you get the final cut ready, then it gets exported. You watch it on a phone, watch it on a laptop, make sure the audio levels aren't whack. Like somebody's computer volume could have been down or something. We like to watch it in the environment it's going to be consumed. So we would even have like a Facebook group, like a private Facebook group or private Facebook page where we would share content and be like, how did this sound on a platform? Or how did it look on a platform? Did it have a bunch of like freaking, what do they call it? Not hieroglyphics, but artifacts.
Yeah.
Did it have a bunch of artifacts and like a lot of, buffering look to it? Not good, right? So we didn't have our bit rate high enough when we exported.
Yeah.
So making sure that it looks good on platform. Oh, this is huge. And Jenna is adamant about this in Grindstone. So when you're presenting like a gala video, once you get the final edit done, actually taking it to, if the gala is local, taking it to the gala the day of, making sure that you play it on the screen to see how the audio levels mix and seeing how, like, if you have underlying music under someone talking, how does that sound? Because sometimes the music can be overpowering and it ruins the whole freaking video in front of thousands of people at the gala, right?
Yeah.
So we've literally taken all of those precautions on delivery because we care more. And that's why clients pay us a lot more money, is because we take all of these precautions and we have systems in place to maintain our quality. Because if I'm me, the individual, I would do all those things. And so then what I did is I taught Jenna, I said, hey, just a heads up, when you export this, depending upon how they edited the levels, it might not sound the same out of a computer as it will in the sound system in Embassy Suites. So go freaking put it on there. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's a disaster. We got to raise the levels up on the speaking because they're completely drowned out by the music.
Yeah.
And that just happened. And it happened because she knew to go review it. So when it came time for the final presentation, it sounded perfect.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's another example of like, caring all the way to the very end of delivery.
Yeah.
And so when you put those systems in place, guys, you put an editing bell curve like this in place, like you will, it sounds like a lot of work, but really it's like a 5-minute Zoom call and making sure they have the assets, monitoring them on like maybe a half an hour Zoom call, a couple 10-minute Zoom calls in the middle, and then maybe an hour or two of editing at the end.
Yeah.
But think about that compared to doing it all yourself for the rest of your life.
Totally. And honestly, so you said, something that stood out to me that I might play a little bit of devil's advocate on is you said that it sounds like a lot of work, but it could only be 5 minutes. But also, it could be a lot of work. But at the same time, it's an asset that you're building, right? So if you go and take the time to build the training and really do that,
Amen.
That is scalable, right? So you say you hire one editor, but once you perfect it with that one editor, then you can bring on a second one and just copy and paste that process, and paste, and that's how you scale, and that's how you scale too.
That's how we scaled. We had SOPs, we had then we had SOPs, and even more than that, we had people who were competent that were training the next level. So like, I didn't spend my time training our 4th, 5th, and 6th editor.
Yeah.
They were trained by my second editor or my first editor, right? And that way we always had like layers of support. So if we got a huge video project in and it had a tight timeline, we weren't worried because we could literally throw all hands on deck on this, on like a multi 6-figure proposal. And they would be like, yeah, it's no problem. We got it. And they would rip through it. And dude, there's nothing more satisfying than like setting really clear, good expectations at the beginning, watching people crush through an edit, getting it at the end and being really satisfied with it. And then the client loves it and they think, and maybe they don't think that you did the entire thing, but at the end, it really doesn't matter.
No.
Because the quality was held high.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so again, if you're the artisan, all the way on the artist side of the spectrum, you're probably not going to vibe in this and you're like, I want the control. Yeah. That's amazing. This is for somebody who wants
to stop listening.
They're probably already gone, right? And for anybody that wants to kind of maybe move towards the middle or to the right side, towards the scaling side and the entrepreneur side, this is for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Because like, it's not a sin to like have someone help you.
No.
Like it's a good thing to like help and give other people opportunities. So that even sounds silly saying out loud, but there are some people that believe that like they have to do everything and their self-worth is tied up in whether or not they did the edit. That's stupid.
Yeah.
right?
I agree.
And that's you're putting your worth in the wrong things. Rather than putting your self-worth in the fact that you did the edit, put your self-worth in the fact that you delivered an amazing product to the client.
And at the end of the day, you said this earlier on the podcast, but at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself the question, what do you want?
What do you want?
If you want to be the guy, then by all means,
amazing,
be the guy.
And be the best.
Be the best. But if you want to scale, this podcast is for you.
Boom. Mic drop. Nice work.
Dope.
About knocked over my mic there. All right. Bye.
Bye.